Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I met my boyfriend back in 2013 when he moved from the US to the Philippines to study nursing at the university in my province. I was still finishing up my own degree at the time, working part-time at a local clinic to help pay for school. We started as friends, bonding over our shared love of terrible action movies and late-night study sessions at the 24/7 diner near campus. Our friendship turned into something more serious pretty quickly. He was this sweet, slightly clueless guy who got lost trying to find the grocery store that was literally 2 blocks from his dorm. I tease him about being a typical confused foreigner, but honestly, his genuine curiosity about everything and everyone around him was refreshing. Most of the international students kept to themselves, but he made an effort to learn Tagalog and actually engage with the local culture. By 2015, I had just graduated with my degree in healthcare administration, ready to start my career. Unfortunately, my boyfriend failed one critical nursing course, which meant he couldn't continue with his program. The university had strict policies about retaking failed courses, and the waiting period would have added another full year to his studies. His family back in California was already struggling financially to support his education abroad, so staying wasn't really an option. The decision for him to return to the US was heartbreaking but practical. His mom, being the organized person she is, had actually booked his return ticket 3 months in advance to get a better deal on the flight. She knew there was a chance he might not complete the program on schedule, so she planned ahead just in case. When the departure day finally arrived, I drove him to the airport. We both knew this might be the last time we'd see each other in person for years. Long-distance relationships are tough under normal circumstances, and with him needing to restart his nursing studies back home, who knew when we'd have the money or time to visit each other? I told him to contact me once he got through security and again when he boarded his flight. I also made him promise to call if anything went wrong, though I figured the worst that could happen would be a delayed flight or lost luggage. 2 hours after I dropped him off, my phone buzzed with a message from him saying he was in trouble. My heart immediately started racing. I called him right away and asked what happened and if he was okay. He told me he was stuck at immigration because the officer had taken all his documents and wouldn't give them back. I asked what he meant and if he had done something wrong. He explained that she was claiming he overstayed his visa, but that didn't make sense since he had dual citizenship. I asked if he had explained that to her and shown both passports. He said he tried, but she just told him he didn't know what he was talking about. She had taken his US passport, his Philippine passport, and all his school transcripts. The whole situation made no sense. As a dual citizen, he had every right to stay in the Philippines for as long as he wanted. There was no such thing as overstaying when you're a citizen of the country. I asked what exactly she wanted from him. He told me she was demanding he pay a fine of 5,000 pesos to get his documents back, but even if he paid, she wouldn't let him leave the country that day. She was threatening to have him arrested if he didn't pay. 5,000 pesos was about $100 at the time, which might not sound like much, but for college students, it was a significant amount. More importantly, the whole thing was obviously a scam. Immigration officers don't just demand cash payments and keep your documents hostage. I knew this kind of corruption happened at airports sometimes, targeting travelers who looked vulnerable or unfamiliar with local laws. My boyfriend, with his obvious American accent and slightly confused demeanor, probably seemed like an easy mark. I told him not to pay anything because the whole thing was completely illegal. I said I would call his mom right away and hung up. I immediately dialed his mother's number. I gotten close to his family over the 2 years we've been together, and his mom treated me like a daughter. She was going to be furious when she heard about this. His mom answered and asked if he had made his flight okay. I told her there was actually a problem, and that an immigration officer was trying to extort money from him and wouldn't let him leave. She asked if I was serious and what exactly was happening. I explained the entire situation to her, and she was livid. She immediately put me on speaker so his dad could hear everything. His father listened quietly, then said he'd handle it, and hung up. Here's the thing I forgot to mention about my boyfriend's dad. He used to work at that exact airport for over 15 years in airport security. During his time there, he became close friends with people in every department. Some of these colleagues were even godparents at my boyfriend's baptism when he was a baby. While his parents were making calls, the immigration officer was still pressuring my boyfriend to pay the fake fine. She told him he could either pay the fee now and sort this out quietly, or she could have him arrested and he'd spend weeks in jail waiting for a hearing. She said it was his choice. My boyfriend said he wasn't paying anything because he hadn't done anything wrong. She told him not to be stupid and that 5,000 pesos was nothing compared to lawyer fees and court costs. She said he should just pay and make it easy on himself. He refused again and said he was going to wait for help. She laughed and told him that nobody was coming to help him and that his girlfriend couldn't do anything from outside the airport. About 20 minutes later, the head of the immigration department came out of his office and approached Karen's desk. He told her to bring the young man to conference room 3 immediately. Karen looked surprised but tried to maintain her authoritative tone. She told her supervisor that this individual had visa violations and needed to pay the appropriate fines before they could process him further. The department head repeated that she should bring him to conference room 3 right now. Karen reluctantly gathered my boyfriend's documents and led him down a hallway to a larger office space. She was probably thinking she'd hit the jackpot and that her supervisor would back up her extortion scheme. My boyfriend sat in one of the chairs and started reading something on his phone, trying to stay calm. Karen stood nearby looking smug, probably imagining how she'd spend her illegal commission. Then the door opened and person after person started walking in. The head of airport security, the supervisor of customs, the manager of ground operations, and several other department heads all entered the room. They immediately recognized my boyfriend and started greeting him warmly. The airport security head asked if it was really him and commented on how much he'd grown. He asked if my boyfriend remembered him and mentioned that he used to give him candy when his dad brought him to work. The customs supervisor said that his father talked about him all the time and asked how nursing school was going. The ground operations manager said they'd heard he might be having some trouble that day and told him not to worry because they'd get it sorted out. Finally, the head of the entire immigration department walked in. This was Karen's ultimate boss, the person who could fire her with a single phone call. He apologized for being late and said he'd just been telling his wife that my boyfriend was there. He mentioned that he used to babysit my boyfriend when his dad worked late shifts and that he'd changed his diapers and taught him how to tie his shoes. At this point, Karen's face went completely white. She was standing in a room full of senior airport officials who were treating her supposed criminal like family. The immigration chief asked what the problem was and why this young man's documents were being held. Karen tried to stammer out some explanation about visa violations and proper procedures, but it was obvious to everyone in the room that she'd been trying to run a scam. The airport security head asked if she was telling them that this kid, whose father worked there for 15 years and who had dual citizenship, had somehow overstayed a visa in his own country. Karen said she was just following protocol, but her voice was shaking. The immigration chief told her that no, she wasn't following protocol at all. He said she was trying to steal money from the son of one of their former colleagues. He told her to pack her desk because she was fired and that security would escort her out of the building. Karen begged them to wait and said she could explain, but the immigration chief cut her off. He said she was also being reported to the Bureau of Immigration and would never work for any government agency again. My boyfriend got all his documents back and was personally escorted to his new gate by the airport security team. He missed his original flight, but his mom had already rebooked him on a later flight that same day. It cost her extra money, but she said it was worth it to know her son was safe. A week later, his dad called to tell me that Karen had indeed been fired immediately and that the Bureau of Immigration had flagged her file. She'd never be able to work for any government office again. My sister moved to South Carolina from Florida about a year ago for her husband's job. She saved for years to afford that place, and it meant everything to her to have a real home for her family. She has 3 old dogs that she absolutely adores. These aren't just pets to her, they're her babies. All 3 are senior dogs with specific health issues, so she keeps them on extremely strict schedules. They eat at exact times, get let out at exact times, and have to be crated during certain hours. No treats allowed, only special vitamins twice a day. No people food whatsoever. It sounds harsh, but these dogs are happy and healthy because she follows their routine religiously. Since she moved away, she tries to visit us in Florida every few months. We're a close family, and she misses everyone. Right after Thanksgiving, she planned a week-long trip to come see us with her husband and little boy. The problem was finding someone trustworthy to watch her dogs. She found this woman on one of those pet sitting websites. The dog sitter had amazing reviews and seemed perfect. She was a stay-at-home mom who did pet sitting for extra money. My sister went over everything multiple times: the feeding schedule, the crating times, the vitamin routine, absolutely no treats or people food. The dog sitter nodded along and promised to follow everything exactly. My sister also mentioned her health issues. She has epilepsy, severe asthma, and bad allergies, so she keeps a lot of prescription medications at home. She brought enough pills for the trip but left the rest in her medicine cabinet. She also had a full bottle of pain medication from when she had her son. She is terrified of getting addicted, so she never used them but kept them just in case. Another thing about my sister, she's been collecting rare beer for 15 years. These aren't regular beers you can buy anywhere. They're special releases from microbreweries, promotional bottles, stuff that doesn't exist anymore. Some are from Florida breweries she can't get anymore since moving. She keeps them displayed in her kitchen like artwork. Each bottle is huge, about 64 ounces. The first 5 days of the trip went perfectly. The dog sitter sent regular texts and video calls. She showed pictures of the dogs and gave detailed updates about when she arrived and left the house. My sister felt completely comfortable and was actually enjoying her vacation for once. Then, on day 6, everything stopped. No texts, no calls, no emails. Complete radio silence. My sister tried calling multiple times throughout the day. Nothing. She started getting that sick feeling in her stomach, but she didn't want to ruin the family time since she doesn't get to see us very often. Day 7, she caught a late flight back to South Carolina. The plane didn't land until 2 in the morning, and then they had to drive an hour to their small town. When they pulled up to the house at 3 in the morning, the front door was wide open. The lawn looked like someone had done donuts in a truck before speeding away. There were deep tire tracks and chunks of grass everywhere. My sister grabbed her crying, exhausted son while her husband went inside to check if it was safe. He called out that it was clear, so they went in. The back door was also wide open. The living room looked like a bomb had exploded. The couch cushions were shredded and thrown everywhere. Every single inch of the bottom floor was covered in dog poop and pee. The smell was unbelievable. Thankfully, the 3 dogs were still in the backyard, but they were shivering, filthy, and clearly distressed. Walking through the house, my sister noticed broken beer bottles scattered around. Some were stuffed deep in the trash can, obviously trying to hide evidence. Others had been refilled with water, and the caps balanced on top to make them look untouched. 82 bottles. Gone. Each one worth more than the dog sitter probably realized. My sister ran to check the medicine cabinet. It looked like a ghost town. Every single pill bottle was empty or missing completely. My sister called the police immediately. When they arrived, they assumed it was a break-in. They took photographs of everything, documented all the missing medication and beer, and filed a report. My sister cleaned what she could and tried to get some sleep upstairs, which thankfully hadn't been touched. The next day, police found the dog sitter. They'd been looking for her and her truck, assuming she'd been kidnapped during the supposed break-in. They found her truck crashed on the side of a highway about 2 miles from where they found her walking along the road, completely out of her mind and screaming at nothing. They arrested her on multiple charges. Her husband bailed her out and picked her up. According to him, this wasn't the first time. The dog sitter had serious drug and alcohol problems that he'd been dealing with for years. At first, she sent my sister apologetic messages, begging her not to press charges and promising to pay for everything. My sister calculated the damages, new couch, new rug, and vet bills because somehow the dogs had gotten into 9 containers of vitamins and one was going into liver failure. The total came to $800. My sister didn't even include the beer, medication, lawn damage, or house cleaning costs. My sister also told her to stop dog sitting immediately and demanded a refund of the pet sitting fee. Since my sister works in advertising, she made it clear that if she ever saw this woman advertising pet sitting services again, she had the resources to destroy her reputation permanently. The dog sitter agreed to everything and said she'd pay when they got their tax refund. My sister waited patiently. In late February, she texted asking about the money. Suddenly, the dog sitter's story completely changed. She claimed she hadn't done anything wrong and that my sister was a terrible dog owner with miserable pets. She denied breaking the bottles or taking the pills. My sister had screenshots of all the original apologetic messages where she admitted to everything. So this was ridiculous. This went back and forth for weeks. Eventually, the dog sitter offered what she called a courtesy. Her friend owned a furniture store and could give my sister a $200 credit for a new couch. Plus, she had an old rug my sister could have. My sister was shocked at how ridiculous this offer was. The dog sitter sent $500 but kept promising the furniture credit was coming soon. March passed. Nothing. On March 20th, my sister walked into small claims court and filed a lawsuit. She took pictures of all the paperwork and sent one message telling the dog sitter that she just filed at small claims court as a courtesy to let her know. The dog sitter absolutely lost it. She threatened to sue for slander, harassment, and emotional distress. She sent message after message calling my sister every horrible name imaginable and threatening our entire family. My sister saved every single text. The court date was this past Tuesday. The dog sitter showed up looking like she'd been hit by a truck. She gave the judge some sob story about how she'd provided excellent care and my sister was making everything up. My sister brought the responding police officer as a witness. She had photographs of all the damage, vet bills, pictures of the empty medicine cabinet, proof she was out of town, the police report from the break-in, and the report from the dog sitter's arrest the next day. The dog sitter tried to argue that you can't serve alcohol to a known alcoholic, implying my sister was somehow responsible. The judge threw that out immediately. Then she tried appealing to their humanity. She told them her husband had just left her and was suing for full custody. She begged them to understand that if she couldn't dog sit, she had no way to support herself or get her kids back. The judge told her she should have thought about that before destroying someone's home and stealing their medication. The judge ruled completely in my sister's favor. The dog sitter has 60 days to pay the remaining $300 or face jail time. Apparently, her life has completely fallen apart. She's homeless and living with her parents. She lost custody of her kids, who don't even want to see her anymore. Her husband filed for divorce because she was abusive, ran up massive debt, and her drinking was so bad during pregnancy that one of their children has fetal alcohol syndrome. She also lost her license from the drunk driving charge. I've struggled with addiction myself, so part of me wants to feel sorry for her. But my sister gave her chance after chance to do the right thing. At some point, you have to take responsibility for your actions instead of blaming everyone else. I've been a renter for most of my adult life, and I thought I'd seen every type of landlord out there. The penny pinchers who won't fix anything, the ones who show up unannounced, the ones who nickel and dime you over every little thing. But I never encountered someone quite like the landlord from hell until last year. Let me back up a bit. 3 years ago, my world got turned upside down when my mom started showing signs of early dementia. She'd been independent her whole life, raised me as a single mother, worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Watching her struggle with simple tasks, like remembering to turn off the stove or getting confused about where she was, broke my heart. My significant other and I made the decision to move her in with us so I could take care of her properly. For a while, we managed okay in our small apartment, but when her condition got worse, we needed more space. She was getting agitated in tight quarters, and the neighbors were complaining about her wandering the hallways at night. We needed a house with a yard where she could feel more comfortable. Finding a rental that would work for our situation wasn't easy. Most landlords heard elderly woman with dementia and suddenly had other applicants they were considering. When we finally found a decent 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, I was willing to overlook some red flags just to get us settled. The landlord made it clear from day one that he was not the understanding type. During our first meeting, he spent 20 minutes ranting about how the previous tenants were absolute slobs who never mowed the lawn once in 6 months. He told me he didn't care what their lease said about renewals because he kicked them out the second their year was up. I assured him we'd definitely keep up with the yard work and mentioned that my mom actually enjoyed gardening when she was having good days. He warned me that she better, since he drove by the property twice a week to check on things. I should have walked away right then. But we'd been looking for months, and my mom was getting more confused with each move between temporary places. We needed stability. The problem started immediately. The house hadn't been properly cleaned after the previous tenants left. There was cat litter scattered across the kitchen floor, sticky residue on all the countertops, and the bathroom looked like it hadn't been scrubbed in months. I spent our first weekend there with rubber gloves and industrial cleaners, making the place livable. Then the maintenance issues started popping up. The kitchen faucet leaked constantly, creating a puddle that made the floor slippery and dangerous for my mom. The back door lock was broken, which was a security concern since my mom sometimes tried to wander outside at night. Getting him to fix anything was like pulling teeth. I called about the kitchen faucet that had been leaking for 2 weeks and asked if he could send someone to look at it. He wanted to know if it was dripping or actually leaking. When I explained it was a steady stream and we were having to keep a bucket under it, he said he'd see what he could do. 3 weeks later, still nothing. I called again and told him the faucet was getting worse and the cabinet underneath was starting to warp from the water damage. He claimed these old houses have quirks and reminded me that I signed the lease without changes. When I explained that this was causing actual damage to his property, he finally agreed to have his guy look at it next month. I even offered to pay for repairs myself just to get things fixed quickly, especially since some issues affected my mom's safety. He refused every time, claiming liability concerns, but then never followed through with getting anything repaired properly. Despite all this frustration, I kept paying rent early every month. We maintained the property, kept the lawn trimmed, never caused any disturbances. I figured we just had to deal with a difficult landlord for 1 year, then we'd find somewhere else. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in October. I woke up to check on my mom and found her unresponsive in her bed. She'd passed peacefully in her sleep, but in that moment, my world collapsed. The next few hours were a blur of paramedics, police officers, and crime scene technicians. Even though there were no signs of anything suspicious, they have to investigate any unattended death. I was trying to process losing my mom while answering questions and dealing with official procedures. The victim services representative was incredibly kind and helped me understand what needed to happen next. We discussed how to notify the landlord about what had occurred since there had been emergency vehicles on the property. I wanted to handle it respectfully, maybe send a written notice explaining the situation. But apparently our neighbors, who also rented from the same landlord, had already called him when they saw the police cars and crime scene van. That's when my phone started ringing, and ringing, and ringing. I was still sitting in the living room with a detective trying to answer questions about my mom's medical history when the calls began. The first few times I ignored it. I was obviously dealing with something important. Then he started calling my mom's phone, the phone of the woman who had just passed away. The detective looked at me with raised eyebrows when the ringtone kept going off. I apologized and explained that it was my landlord, who had apparently heard something happened. The detective told me I didn't need to answer that right now, but he kept calling, both my phone and hers, over and over. Finally, I picked up just to make it stop. He immediately demanded to know what was going on at his property and why there were police cars everywhere. I told him this really wasn't a good time because my mother had passed away that morning and I was still speaking with the officers. Instead of offering condolences, he asked when the police would be done because he needed to know if there was damage to the house. I just told him my mom died, and he was worried about property damage. I said I didn't know when they'd be finished and that I'd call him later when things were settled. He complained that this was unacceptable and that he should have been notified immediately. He even asked what would happen if the media showed up. I hung up on him and turned off both phones. Later that day, after all the officials had left and I was trying to figure out funeral arrangements, I realized we had a practical problem. All the utilities had been set up in my mom's name. We'd split the bills evenly between us because it made her feel more independent and secure after years of financial stress. She'd wanted to feel like she was contributing to the household. I wasn't listed on any of the accounts. The electric company explained they'd need a death certificate before they could discuss the account with me or transfer service. That made sense from a legal standpoint, but getting a death certificate takes time. I assumed that when the lease ended in 2 months, the electricity would automatically shut off, or that the landlord would transfer it to his name to keep the power on for showing the property to new tenants. I had bigger things to worry about than utility logistics. I was wrong on both counts. Last week I got a call from someone at the electric company. They told me that service was still active at my previous address under my mother's name, and the account was now 60 days past due. I was confused and explained that I thought service would end when the lease expired. They clarified that service continues until it's specifically cancelled or disconnected for non-payment. When I mentioned that we'd moved out months ago and my mom had passed away, and asked if the landlord should have switched it to his name, they explained they could only work with the account holder unless someone had legal authority over the account. That's when I realized what had happened. The landlord had been getting free electricity for 2 months, probably hoping I'd just keep paying the bill indefinitely. He knew my mom had passed. He knew we'd moved out, but he was perfectly happy to let her estate rack up electric charges while he enjoyed free utilities. I finally got the death certificate and had the power disconnected. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. We were heading into the first major cold snap of the winter, with temperatures dropping well below freezing for several days straight. Since he doesn't live in the property and it's been empty since we moved out, there's no one there to notice that the heat isn't working. Anyone looking to rent a house isn't going to schedule tours during a hard freeze. I hope those 2 months of free electricity were worth it. I hope he enjoyed saving those utility costs while treating a grieving family like garbage. And I sincerely hope that when he finally discovers the power is off, he finds that every pipe in that house has frozen solid and burst, flooding his precious property with thousands of gallons of water. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.